The stars looked peaceful through the bridge windows of the UES Prometheus. Commander Elena Vasquez stood with her hands behind her back, watching the endless blackness of space as her ship dropped out of hyperspace. The jump had been smooth. The colonists in the lower decks were probably still sleeping. Everything was going according to plan. The Prometheus was not a warship. She was a cargo freighter, big and slow and full of hope. In her belly, she carried mining equipment, terraforming machines, and enough supplies to build a new home on a distant world. More importantly, she carried 2,400 souls, families, children, engineers and doctors and teachers, all of them dreaming of a fresh start on a planet called New Valencia. Elena had made this kind of run before. She was 43 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes from too many years of staring at screens. She had commanded cargo ships for 15 years. She had never fired a weapon in anger. She had never needed to. "Commander, we have cleared the hyperspace corridor," said Lieutenant Park from the navigation console. He was young, maybe 25, with a calm voice that Elena appreciated. "We are now in the Velcar system. New Valencia is approximately 6 days away at standard cruise speed." Elena nodded. "Good. Begin standard approach. Wake the day shift and tell the colonists they can use the observation deck if they want to see the stars." She was about to turn away from the window when something caught her eye. A flicker, a shimmer in the darkness, like heat rising from hot ground. She frowned and leaned closer to the glass. "Lieutenant, are you seeing any?" The shimmer exploded into light. 6 massive shapes appeared out of nothing, surrounding the Prometheus like wolves around a wounded deer. They were warships. Elena knew warships when she saw them. These vessels were covered in sharp angles and dark metal, with weapons that glowed red along their hulls. They were beautiful in a terrible way, like sharks or storms or other things that killed without mercy. "Contact!" shouted Park, his calm voice suddenly sharp with fear. 6 vessels, unknown configuration. They just decloaked around us. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Red lights flashed on every console. Elena grabbed the armrest of her command chair as the Prometheus shook from the energy of the enemy ships powering their weapons. "Shields up. Evasive maneuvers," Elena commanded. "Commander, we are a cargo ship," said Park, his fingers flying across his console. "Our shields are for asteroid debris. They will not stop military weapons. Then get us out of here. Emergency jump back to human space. Calculating jump coordinates now. It will take 4 minutes to..." He never finished the sentence. A sound came from everywhere at once. It was not like any weapon Elena had ever heard. It was a deep hum that she felt in her bones, in her teeth, in her heart. The lights on the bridge flickered once, twice, and then died. Every screen went black. Every console stopped responding. The hum of the engines, which Elena had heard for so many years that she barely noticed it anymore, fell silent. The Prometheus went dark. Elena stood in the blackness, listening to the panicked breathing of her bridge crew. Emergency lights flickered on after a few seconds, casting everything in a dim red glow. But that was all. Nothing else worked. The ship was dead. "Report," Elena said. Her voice was steady. She had learned long ago that a commander could not show fear, even when fear was all she felt. "I do not know what happened," Park said. He was pressing buttons on his console. But nothing responded. "Everything is offline. Engines, weapons, communications, navigation. Even the backup systems are down." "Life support?" A new voice answered. It was Chief Engineer Marcus Cole, speaking through a handheld radio that still worked because it had its own battery. His voice was rough and tired, like a man who had seen too much and slept too little. "Life support is on emergency reserves, Commander. We have maybe 6 hours of air recycling. The main systems are completely fried. Whatever they hit us with, it was not meant to destroy us. It was meant to disable us." Elena closed her eyes for a moment. She understood now. The enemy did not want to blow them up. They wanted them alive. And that was much, much worse. The bridge speakers crackled. Someone was broadcasting a message, cutting through the dead electronics with technology far beyond anything humans possessed. A voice filled the room. It was deep and cold, with a strange accent that made the words sound like they were being spoken by something that had only recently learned how human mouths worked. "Attention, human vessel. I am Lord Sithrak of the Kethvari Dominion. Your ship is now property of the Dominion. Your people are now resources of the Dominion. You will lower your remaining defenses and prepare to be boarded. You have 12 hours to comply. If you do not comply, we will board you by force and harvest everyone aboard. There will be no negotiation. There will be no escape. Your species has been classified as suitable for biological processing. Accept your fate with dignity, and your deaths will be quick. Resist, and they will not be. The message ended. Silence filled the bridge. Elena looked around at her crew. She saw fear in their eyes. She saw despair. Lieutenant Park was staring at his dead console like he could not believe what was happening. A young ensign near the back was crying silently. These were not soldiers. They were civilians in uniforms, people who had signed up for adventure and exploration, not for war and death. "Who are the Kethvari?" asked Park quietly. Elena shook her head. "I have heard rumors. They are an empire on the far edge of explored space. They view other species as resources to be harvested. Slaves, food, raw materials for their factories." She paused. "No human has ever met them and lived to tell about it. Until now. What do we do?" asked the crying ensign. Her name was Chen, Elena remembered. She was 19 years old, and this was her first deep space assignment. Elena did not answer immediately. She walked to the window and looked out at the enemy warships. They were holding position around the Prometheus, their weapons still glowing, waiting like patient predators. Beyond them, she could see the distant stars, so beautiful and so unreachable now. She thought about the colonists below, the families, the children. All of them had trusted her to bring them safely to their new home. All of them were now trapped on a dying ship, surrounded by monsters who saw them as meat. 12 hours. They had 12 hours to do something, but what could they do? They had no weapons. They had no engines. They had no way to call for help. "Commander." Elena turned. Marcus Cole had come up to the bridge. He was a big man with thick arms and hands covered in old burn scars from decades of working with machines. His face was hard to read, but Elena had known him for 5 years. She could see something in his eyes that was not fear or despair. It was calculation. "Marcus," she said, "give me some good news." "I cannot give you good news," he said slowly, "but I can give you something interesting." He held up a tablet computer. Unlike everything else on the ship, it was still working. He must have kept it shielded somehow. That weapon they hit us with, the one that killed all our systems. It overloaded everything with a massive electromagnetic pulse, fried every circuit, every wire, every chip. "I know this already, but it did not fry the reactor." Elena frowned. "The fusion reactor? That is impossible. The containment systems alone would have—" "The containment systems are damaged," Marcus interrupted. "Badly damaged. The reactor should have exploded by now, but it has not. The core is still active, still producing power. It is just not connected to anything anymore." He showed her the tablet screen. It displayed the reactor's status in glowing numbers. The pulse destabilized it in a way I have never seen before. Right now, we have more energy in that reactor than we could ever use. It is like a bomb waiting to go off. "So we are going to explode anyway," Elena said bitterly. "That is not helpful, Marcus." "No, Commander, you do not understand." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Elena could hear. "They killed our ship, but they did not kill our power. And we have 300 tons of metallic hydrogen fuel in the cargo bay. We have plasma drills and gravitational compressors. We have everything we need to—" "To what?" Marcus met her eyes. In the red emergency light, his face looked like it was carved from stone. "To turn this ship into a weapon. A big one. Big enough to make them regret ever finding us." Elena stared at him. For a long moment, she could not speak. The idea was insane. It was impossible. It was suicide. But it was also the most human response she could imagine. "Tell me more," she said. Marcus explained his theory in quick, quiet words. The metallic hydrogen was incredibly dense fuel, packed with more energy than any other substance humans knew how to make. The plasma drills were designed to cut through asteroids, focusing beams of superheated matter into points of incredible destruction. The gravitational compressors could squeeze matter down to a fraction of its size, increasing its density and its power. If they connected all of these things together, if they channeled the unstable reactor through the mining array, if they focused everything into one massive beam, they could create something terrible, a weapon so powerful it could crack the crust of a planet. One shot. No way to aim it twice. No way to survive firing it. But it would be enough to hurt the HFY in a way they had never been hurt before. You are talking about destroying ourselves, Elena said. I am talking about choosing how we die, Marcus replied. Those aliens out there, they want to harvest us. They want to take us apart and use us for food or slaves or whatever else they need. They think we are helpless. They think we are prey. His voice hardened. I say we show them what prey can do when it has nothing left to lose. Elena looked out the window again. The enemy warships were still waiting, patient and confident. They probably had weapons that could vaporize the Prometheus in seconds if they wanted to. But they did not want to. They wanted the people inside. They wanted the meat. She thought about the colonists again. The children. Little boys and girls who had been playing in the ship's gardens just hours ago, laughing and chasing each other between the trees. What would happen to them if the HFY took the ship? She knew the answer. She did not want to think about it, but she knew. We cannot decide this alone, she said finally. This is not just our lives. This is everyone aboard. They deserve a choice. Marcus nodded. Then give them one. Elena turned to her bridge crew. They were all watching her, waiting for orders, waiting for hope. She took a deep breath. Listen to me, all of you. What I am about to say cannot leave this room until I give permission. We have a plan. It is not a good plan. It will not save us, but it might let us die on our own terms, fighting back, instead of being harvested like animals. She paused. We can turn this ship into a weapon big enough to hurt those monsters out there in a way they will never forget. But using it will kill everyone aboard. There is no escape. There is no survival. Just one chance to make our deaths mean something. The bridge was silent. Elena could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Then Lieutenant Park spoke. His voice was quiet but steady. What is the target? Marcus stepped forward. He pulled up a star chart on his tablet and pointed to a pale dot in the distance. That is Keth Prime, the homeworld of the HFY Dominion, the seat of their empire. If we can align the ship correctly, we can fire directly at it. You want to attack their planet? Asked Ensign Chen. Her tears had dried. Her face was pale but focused. I want to burn their capital city, Marcus said. I want to kill their leaders, destroy their palaces, and carve a scar across their world that they will see for 1,000 years. I want every species in this galaxy to know what happens when you corner a human. The words hung in the air. Elena watched her crew. She saw fear still. Yes, but she saw something else now too. She saw anger. She saw determination. She saw the stubborn, defiant fire that had carried humanity across the stars, through wars and plagues and disasters that would have destroyed any weaker species. I will need volunteers, Elena said. I cannot order anyone to do this, but if enough of us agree, if the colonists agree, then we will do it. We will make our last hours count. One by one, her bridge crew stood up. Park, Chen, the helmsman, a quiet man named Rodriguez who had not spoken a word since the attack, the communications officer, a woman named Okonkwo who had 3 children in the colony section below. All of them stood. We are with you, Commander, Park said. Whatever happens. Elena felt something warm spread through her chest. It was not happiness. There was no room for happiness now, but it was pride. Pride in these ordinary, extraordinary people who had chosen to fight instead of surrender. Then let us get to work, she said. We have 12 hours to build a planet killer, and I intend to use every single minute. The work began immediately. Marcus rushed back to engineering to assess what was possible and what was fantasy. Elena ordered her crew to begin spreading the word quietly among the colonists. Not panic, not despair, just the truth, and a choice. As the hours ticked by, as the enemy warships waited patiently outside, something changed aboard the Prometheus. The fear did not disappear, but it transformed. It became fuel. It became purpose. It became the cold, hard resolve of people who had accepted their fate and decided to make it count. They were going to die. That was certain now. But they were not going to die as victims. They were not going to die begging for mercy. They were going to die as humans, fighting until the very end, screaming their defiance into the void, and the galaxy was going to remember their scream forever. Marcus Cole had spent 30 years working with machines. He had started as a teenager in the shipyards of Mars, learning to weld metal and wire circuits. He had worked his way up through freighters and transports and mining vessels, fixing engines and patching hulls and keeping ships alive in the cold darkness of space. He had seen things break in every way possible. He had fixed things that everyone said could not be fixed. But he had never built a weapon before. The engineering bay of the Prometheus was a mess. Emergency lights cast everything in a dim red glow. Cables hung from the ceiling like dead snakes. Consoles that had once displayed clean readouts were now dark and useless. The air smelled like burned plastic and ozone. Marcus stood in the middle of the chaos, surrounded by his engineering team. There were 12 of them, men and women who had worked with him for years. They looked at him with a mix of exhaustion and determination. None of them had slept since the attack. None of them planned to sleep until this was done. "All right," Marcus said, spreading a hand-drawn schematic across a metal table. "Here is what we know. The reactor is still active, but the containment field is damaged. We have maybe 10 hours before it goes critical on its own. That gives us a window." "A window to do what, exactly?" asked Rivera, his second in command. She was a small woman with short gray hair and steady hands. She had been an engineer longer than Marcus had been alive. "A window to make the biggest gun in human history." Marcus tapped the schematic. "The reactor is putting out more power than we can measure. Normally, that power would be distributed through the ship's systems, converted into thrust and life support and all the other things that keep us moving. But those systems are dead now. The power has nowhere to go, which is why we are going to explode," said a young engineer named Tanaka. "Which is why we are going to explode in a very specific direction," Marcus corrected. "Look, the mining array on the lower deck was designed to crack asteroids. It uses plasma drills and gravitational compressors to focus energy into beams that can cut through solid rock. The array was never meant to handle this much power. But if we modify it, if we strengthen the focusing chambers and reinforce the emitters, we can channel the reactor's output through it." Rivera frowned. "You are talking about turning the entire ship into a directed energy weapon." "Yes. That is insane. Yes. The power transfer alone would melt everything between the reactor and the array." "Probably. And the metallic hydrogen in the cargo bay? If that ignites during the power transfer, we will vaporize before we can fire." "Also probably." Marcus looked around at his team. "I never said this was a good plan. I said it was a plan, the only one we have." The engineering bay fell silent. Marcus could hear the distant hum of the reactor, unstable and hungry, waiting to consume them all. He could feel the weight of what he was asking. These people had families. They had hopes and dreams and futures that were now being measured in hours instead of years. Then Rivera spoke again. Her voice was calm, almost casual. "So what do you need us to do?" Marcus felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He had known these people would not let him down. Engineers were a special breed. They solved problems. They found ways. They built things that worked even when everyone said they would not. "First, we need to bypass the damaged containment systems," he said. "We cannot fix them, but we can route around them. If we create a direct conduit from the reactor core to the mining array, we can channel the energy without going through the ship's normal systems. That conduit will need to be completely insulated," said Tanaka, "or it will fry everything around it." "I know. We will need to strip insulation from everywhere we can find it. The walls, the floors, the colony pods. Whatever is not essential to keeping people alive for the next few hours." "What about the focusing array?" asked another engineer named Obi. He was tall and quiet, with hands that could rebuild a fusion injector in total darkness. "The mining drills were designed for short bursts at close range. You are talking about sustained output across astronomical distances." Marcus nodded. "That is where the gravitational compressors come in. We take them offline from the mining system and repurpose them. Instead of compressing asteroid material, we use them to compress the plasma beam itself. Tighter focus, more power per square meter, less spread over distance. That will increase the heat at the emitter by a factor of at least 20, Rivera said. The emitter will melt, then we reinforce it. We use the hull plating from the cargo bay doors. That alloy can handle temperatures up to 4,000 degrees. We build a new emitter, stronger than anything the Prometheus was designed to have. Rivera shook her head slowly, but she was smiling. It was a tired smile, the smile of someone who had accepted the impossible and decided to do it anyway. You have thought about this a lot, Marcus. I have been thinking about it since the moment those ships appeared, he admitted. When I saw what their weapon did to us, when I realized the reactor was still active, I started running calculations in my head. At first I thought I was crazy. Then I realized I was not crazy enough. What do you mean? Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense. The mining array was designed to crack asteroids. But asteroids are small, rocks floating in space. What I am proposing is not cracking an asteroid. What I am proposing is hitting a planet. The room went very quiet. Keth Prime, Marcus continued. The homeworld of the Keth Vari Dominion. It is visible from here, just a pale dot in the distance. If we align the Prometheus correctly, if we time the shot right, we can send a beam of plasma and focused energy directly at their capital. The beam will travel across space for several minutes. When it hits, it will punch through their atmosphere like it is not there. It will vaporize their orbital stations. It will burn through whatever shields they have. And when it reaches the surface, it will carve a trench across their largest continent. How big? Asked Obi quietly. Big enough to destroy their capital city. Big enough to kill millions. Big enough to make every species in the galaxy think twice before attacking a human ship again. Tanaka was staring at the schematic like it was a holy text. This is not a weapon, he said softly. This is a statement. Yes, Marcus agreed. A statement written in fire. We cannot survive this. We cannot escape. But we can make sure that our deaths matter. We can make sure that the Keth Vari remember us forever. And we can make sure that no one ever looks at humanity as easy prey again. The engineers looked at each other. Marcus could see them processing, calculating, weighing the impossibility of what he was asking against the impossibility of the situation they were in. He did not rush them. This was not a decision to be made lightly. Finally, Rivera spoke for all of them. Tell us what to do. Marcus felt his heart swell with pride. These were his people. These were engineers. Give them a problem, and they would solve it, even if the problem was their own death. First priority is the conduit, he said. We need a clear path from the reactor to the mining array. That means cutting through 3 decks and reinforcing every meter of the passage. Rivera, you are in charge of that. Take whoever you need. Rivera nodded and immediately began calling out names, assigning tasks, organizing the impossible into manageable steps. That was what engineers did. They broke down mountains into pebbles and moved them one at a time. Tanaka, you are on the focusing system. I need those gravitational compressors reconfigured by hour 8. That gives you 6 hours to do what would normally take 6 weeks. Tanaka did not argue. He just nodded and headed for the cargo bay. Obi, you are building me a new emitter. I want the strongest thing we have ever made. Use the hull plating. Use the structural supports. Use whatever you need. If it can handle heat, I want it in that emitter. Understood, Obi said, already calculating material requirements in his head. Marcus assigned tasks to the rest of the team and then stepped back to look at the schematic again. It was rough and incomplete, full of question marks and guesses. There were 100 things that could go wrong, 1,000. Any sane engineer would look at this plan and laugh, but sanity was a luxury they could no longer afford. He was about to head to the reactor room when Commander Vasquez appeared in the doorway. She looked tired but focused, her jaw set with determination. How is it going? She asked. We are making progress, Marcus said. But I need more hands. Can you spare anyone from the bridge crew? Everyone who can walk is already working, Elena said. The colonists are helping too. I gave them the choice, just like we discussed. She paused. They voted, Marcus. All of them. Even the children's parents voted for them. And? Unanimous. Not a single person chose surrender. Marcus let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. He had hoped the colonists would agree, but he had not been certain. These were not soldiers. These were farmers and teachers and shopkeepers. Ordinary people who had wanted nothing more than a quiet life on a new world. But ordinary people could be extraordinary when they had no other choice. Good, he said, because I am going to need every single one of them. Elena raised an eyebrow. What do you need? We have to strip the ship. Everything that is not essential to keeping people alive for the next 10 hours needs to be repurposed. Insulation from the walls, metal from the furniture, wiring from every non-critical system. He hesitated. Including the colony pods, including the gardens. The colony pods were the heart of the Prometheus. They held the supplies and equipment that the colonists would need to build their new home. The gardens were full of plants and seeds and soil, carefully prepared for transplanting to New Valencia. Destroying them meant destroying any chance of the mission succeeding. But the mission had already failed. Now there was only survival, and survival had been reduced to a single, terrible question. How do we die? Elena nodded slowly. I will make it happen. What else? We need to rotate the ship. The mining array is on the lower deck, facing away from Keth Prime. We need to turn the Prometheus so the array points directly at the target. Our maneuvering thrusters are dead. I know, but we still have the emergency venting systems. If we vent atmosphere from specific points on the hull, we can create thrust. Not much, but enough to rotate the ship a few degrees at a time. Elena's eyes widened. You want to use our air to move the ship? We will be dead before we run out of air anyway. Might as well use it for something useful. She stared at him for a long moment, then laughed. It was a short, sharp laugh, full of dark humor. You know, Marcus, when I hired you 5 years ago, you told me you were just a simple engineer who wanted to keep ships running. I am a simple engineer, he said. I am just keeping this ship running for one last job. Elena put her hand on his shoulder. Make it count. I will. She left to organize the colonists, and Marcus headed for the reactor room. The journey took him through corridors that were already being torn apart. He passed groups of colonists pulling wire from the walls, their hands raw and bleeding from the work. He passed children carrying bundles of insulation, their faces serious and focused. He passed elderly men and women who could barely walk but refused to sit idle while others worked. No one complained. No one asked why. They all knew. When he reached the reactor room, the heat hit him like a wall. The damaged containment fields were leaking radiation and thermal energy, making the air shimmer. Warning lights flashed constantly, and alarms that should have been deafening were silent because the speakers had been fried. Marcus stood before the reactor core and looked at the readings on his tablet. The numbers were terrifying. The reactor was producing enough power to run a small city, and it had nowhere to go. It was like a bomb counting down. Except the timer was made of physics instead of electronics. But physics could be manipulated. Physics could be directed. And Marcus Cole was very good at making physics do what he wanted. He began working on the bypass conduit, welding metal plates together with a portable torch while the heat tried to cook him alive. Sweat poured down his face and soaked his clothes. His hands shook from exhaustion, but he did not stop. Hours passed. The work continued. Throughout the ship, people who had never built anything more complex than a bookshelf were learning to strip wires and reinforce supports and carry heavy equipment through narrow corridors. Doctors who had trained for years to save lives were now helping to build a weapon. Teachers who had dedicated themselves to nurturing young minds were showing children how to sort scrap metal. And in the cargo bay, Tanaka worked on the gravitational compressors with the focus of a man possessed. He had figured out a way to link them together, creating a cascading effect that would multiply their power exponentially. It should not have been possible with the equipment they had, but Tanaka was making it possible anyway. In another section of the ship, Obi was welding the new emitter together from pieces of hull plating. The result looked ugly, a rough cylinder of blackened metal covered in hastily attached cooling pipes, but when he tested it with a low-power diagnostic beam, it held. It would hold long enough. And on the bridge, Elena watched through the window as the Prometheus slowly, painfully rotated. The emergency venting was working. Tiny jets of precious atmosphere pushed against the void, turning the dying ship degree by degree until the mining array pointed at a pale dot in the distance. Keth Prime, the heart of an empire that thought humans were nothing but cattle. They were about to learn how wrong they were. By hour 8, the main components were in place. The conduit ran from the reactor through 3 decks, wrapped in every piece of insulation they could find. The focusing system was ready. The gravitational compressors linked together in a configuration that Tanaka called theoretical, and everyone else called crazy. The emitter was mounted and tested, ugly but functional. Marcus gathered his team for one final check. They were all exhausted, running on adrenaline and desperation. But they were also proud. They had done the impossible in half the time anyone would have thought possible. Status report, Marcus said. Conduit is stable, Rivera reported. I give it a 50% chance of holding through the full discharge. Focusing system is operational, Tanaka added. I have no idea if the cascade effect will work as planned, but the math says it should. Emitter is mounted and aligned. Obi finished. It will melt after approximately 3 seconds of sustained fire. But 3 seconds should be enough. 3 seconds. That was all they would get. 3 seconds to fire a beam across space and burn a scar across an alien world. Marcus nodded. Good work, all of you. I know I asked the impossible, and you delivered. You did not ask the impossible, Rivera said quietly. You asked us to be engineers. This is what we do. We find ways. Marcus smiled for the first time since the attack. It was a tired smile, sad and proud and ready for the end. Then let us find a way to make history. He contacted the bridge and told Commander Vasquez that the weapon was ready. There was a long pause before she responded. How long until we can fire? She asked. We need to wait for optimal alignment. The ship is still rotating. Another 4 hours and we will have a clear shot at Keth Prime. 4 hours, Elena repeated. We only have 3 hours left before the Kethvari deadline. I know. We will have to stall them. Another pause. Then Elena's voice came back, calm and cold. Leave that to me. I will buy you the time you need. Marcus did not ask how. He trusted her. They all trusted her. The weapon was built. The plan was in motion. Now all they had to do was wait, and hope, and prepare to die in a blaze of fire that would light up the galaxy. In the corridors of the Prometheus, exhausted humans rested against walls and held their loved ones close. Children fell asleep in their parents' arms, unaware of what was coming. Old couples held hands and whispered things they had never said before. And in the reactor room, the unstable heart of their ship pulsed with terrible power, waiting to be unleashed. The countdown had begun. Commander Elena Vasquez stood alone in her quarters, looking at herself in a small mirror that had somehow survived the attack. The woman staring back at her looked old and tired. There were dark circles under her eyes and lines on her face that seemed deeper than they had been yesterday. She had to become someone else now. She had to become the thing the Kethvari expected to see. A broken, defeated human begging for mercy. She had to lie with her face, her voice, her entire body, and she had to do it well enough to buy her people 4 more hours. Elena had never been good at lying. She had built her career on honesty and directness. She said what she meant and meant what she said. That was why her crews trusted her. But trust would not save them now. Only deception would. She thought about the colonists in the lower decks. The families huddled together, waiting for the end. The children who had been told they were playing a game, stripping wire and carrying metal, not knowing they were helping to build a weapon. Some of them were still playing that game now, their laughter echoing through corridors that should have been filled with screams. For them, Elena could lie. For them, she could become anyone. She took a deep breath, let her shoulders slump, and forced tears into her eyes. Then she walked to the bridge. The bridge crew looked up when she entered. They saw the change in her immediately. Lieutenant Park opened his mouth to ask if she was all right, but Elena silenced him with a tiny shake of her head. She needed to stay in character. Open a channel to the Kethvari flagship, she said. Her voice trembled. It was not hard to make it tremble. The fear was real. She just had to let it show. Channel open, Commander, said the communications officer. Elena faced the main screen, where static flickered for a moment before being replaced by a face. Lord Sithrak of the Kethvari Dominion was not human. His skin was dark purple, almost black, stretched over a skull that was too long and too narrow. His eyes were large and golden, with vertical pupils like a cat. He had no nose, just 2 slits above a mouth full of small, sharp teeth. He was smiling. At least, Elena thought it was a smile. The expression made her skin crawl. Commander Vasquez, Sithrak said. His voice was smooth and oily, like something slick sliding over stone. I was wondering when you would contact me. Your deadline approaches. Have you made your decision? Elena let her lower lip quiver. Lord Sithrak, please, I am begging you, give us more time. We have over 2,000 people aboard, including children. We need time to prepare them for what is coming. Sithrak's smile widened. His golden eyes glittered with amusement. Prepare them? There is nothing to prepare. They will be processed. It is efficient. It is painless. If they do not struggle, why would you need more time? Because they are scared, Elena said, letting a sob break her voice. They are terrified. If you try to board now, they will panic. They will fight. People will get hurt. Your people might get hurt. Please, give us a few more hours to calm them down, to help them accept what is happening. She hated every word coming out of her mouth. She hated pretending to be weak, pretending to surrender, pretending to accept the fate this monster was offering. But she forced herself to continue. I can make them compliant, she said. I can make them cooperate. Just give me time. Sithrak studied her through the screen. His vertical pupils narrowed to thin lines as he considered her words. Elena held her breath, waiting, praying that her performance was convincing enough. You are pathetic, Sithrak said finally, but you are also practical. I appreciate that. Very well, Commander. I will give you 3 additional hours. Use them to calm your herd. But when the time is up, I expect full cooperation. If I detect any resistance, I will order my ships to destroy your vessel and harvest what remains from the debris. Thank you, Elena whispered. Thank you, Lord Sithrak. You are merciful, Sithrak laughed. It was an ugly sound, like bones scraping together. Merciful? No. I am entertained. I have not seen a human beg before. It is even more satisfying than I imagined. He leaned closer to the camera. I am going to broadcast this conversation to my people, Commander. They will enjoy watching you grovel. It will remind them why the Kethvari are superior. The screen went dark. Elena stood frozen for a moment, her fists clenched at her sides. Then she straightened her spine and wiped the false tears from her face. Did it work? Park asked quietly. We have 3 more hours, Elena said. Her voice was cold now, all trace of weakness gone. That gives us just enough time. Is the rotation still on schedule? We are at 47 degrees. We need to reach 90 for optimal alignment. Keep venting, slowly. We cannot let them notice the ship is moving. Understood, Commander. Elena turned to the window and looked out at the enemy warships. They were still holding position, patient and confident. They thought they had won. They thought the humans aboard the Prometheus were already cattle, just waiting to be collected. They had no idea what was really happening inside this dying ship. 3 decks below, the work continued. Marcus and his engineers were making final adjustments to the conduit, reinforcing weak points and checking connections. The colonists who had been helping with the construction were now being gathered in the safest areas of the ship, away from the reactor and the mining array. Not that any area would be truly safe when the weapon fired, but it felt wrong to make people wait in a hallway full of exposed power cables. In the cargo bay, something unexpected was happening. A group of children had gathered around an elderly man named Dr. William Chen. He was not related to Ensign Chen on the bridge, though they shared a name and a stubborn determination. Dr. Chen was a botanist who had been planning to study the plant life on New Valencia. He was also a grandfather, and when the crisis began, he had taken it upon himself to keep the children calm. All right, everyone, he said, clapping his hands together. Who wants to play the wire game? A dozen small hands shot into the air. The children ranged from 5 to 12 years old, their faces dirty but excited. They did not fully understand what was happening. Their parents had told them it was an emergency, that everyone needed to help, that the grown-ups were working on something important. That was enough for them. Children were good at accepting strange situations, as long as they felt safe. Good, good, Dr. Chen said. Now the wire game has rules. First rule, the fastest team wins. Second rule, no one gets hurt. Third rule, if you find a wire that is red and yellow, you leave it alone and come tell me. Can everyone remember that? Yes, Dr. Chen, the children chorused. Excellent. Now teams of 3, go. The children scattered through the cargo bay, their small fingers surprisingly nimble as they stripped wire from damaged consoles and broken equipment. They did not know that the wire they were collecting would be used to help build a weapon. They did not know that the weapon would kill everyone aboard, including themselves. They just knew that the grown-ups needed help, and helping felt good. Dr. Chen watched them with a mixture of pride and sorrow. He had lived a long life, full of achievements and disappointments, love and loss. He had always hoped to die peacefully in his sleep on some sunny afternoon. Instead, he was going to die in the darkness of space, surrounded by children who would never grow up. But at least they would not die afraid. At least they would die thinking they were heroes. One of the children, a little girl named Maya, ran up to him with a bundle of wire in her arms. "Dr. Chen, look how much I found." "That is wonderful, Maya. You are doing such a good job. Is this going to help fix the ship?" Dr. Chen hesitated. He could not lie to children, not directly, but he could not tell them the truth either. "It is going to help us do something very important," he said finally. "Something that will make sure everyone remembers us." Maya nodded seriously. "Mama said we might not get to go to the new planet." "No, sweetheart, we might not. But she also said that what we are doing is brave. She said we are being heroes." Dr. Chen felt his throat tighten. "Your mama is right. You are all heroes, every single one of you." Maya smiled, her small face lighting up with pride. Then she ran off to collect more wire, calling for her teammates to follow. Dr. Chen turned away so the children would not see the tears in his eyes. On the bridge, Elena was facing another challenge. The HFY were broadcasting her surrender negotiation across their entire empire, just as Sithrak had promised. But they were doing more than that. They were commenting on it, mocking the pathetic humans, laughing at Elena's tears and begging. One of her crew had managed to tap into the broadcast and was playing it on a small screen. Elena watched for a moment, seeing herself grovel before an alien monster, hearing the HFY laughter in the background. "Turn it off," she said quietly. "Commander, there is something you should see," said Lieutenant Park. He pointed at the screen. "They are not just broadcasting to their own people. This signal is being transmitted on open frequencies. Other species are receiving it." Elena frowned. "What other species?" "Unknown. But the transmission includes a tag that identifies the Prometheus as a human vessel. They want the galaxy to see what happened to us." Park's voice was grim. "They are making an example of us." "Good," Elena said. Park stared at her. "Good?" "Yes, good. Let them broadcast. Let every species in the galaxy see what the HFY did to a helpless cargo ship. And let them all see what happens next." Understanding dawned in Park's eyes. "When we fire the weapon, every signal that carries our humiliation will also carry our response. The same channels that showed the HFY laughing will show their homeworld burning." Elena smiled, and there was nothing warm about it. "We could not have planned better propaganda if we tried." The hours crawled by. Elena continued to play her role, contacting Sithrak periodically to beg for small mercies, better air quality, food for the children, permission to hold religious services. Each time, Sithrak granted her requests with condescending amusement. Each time, Elena felt a little piece of her soul die, but she also felt something else growing inside her. A cold, hard certainty that what they were doing was right. The HFY were monsters. They saw other species as resources, things to be used and discarded. They had probably done this to countless other ships, countless other peoples. The galaxy was full of their victims. Today, the victims were going to strike back. In engineering, Marcus was running final diagnostics on the weapons system. Everything was as ready as it was going to be. The conduit was holding. The focusing system was calibrated. The emitter was aligned. All they needed now was the signal to fire. "How are we looking?" Rivera asked, coming up beside him. 50-50, Marcus said honestly. "Maybe 40-60 against us. There are too many variables. The conduit might fail. The focusing might not work as planned. The emitter might melt before we get enough energy through. And if everything works, then we burn a hole in their planet the size of a small country." Marcus looked at his second-in-command. "Rivera, I want you to know something. Working with you has been the honor of my career. Whatever happens in the next hour, I am glad I got to build this impossible thing with you." Rivera smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. "Same to you, Marcus. Now let us make sure it works." On the bridge, Elena received word that the rotation was complete. The Prometheus was now perfectly aligned, her mining array pointing directly at Keth Prime. Through the window, the pale dot of the alien homeworld was barely visible, a tiny point of light that held billions of lives. In less than an hour, that light was going to change forever. Elena opened a channel to Marcus. "Are we ready?" "As ready as we will ever be. Stand by for my signal. I have one more performance to give." She turned to face the main screen and nodded at her communications officer. "Get me Lord Sithrak. Tell him the humans are ready to surrender." The screen flickered, and Sithrak appeared. He looked pleased, his golden eyes bright with anticipation. "Commander Vasquez, has your deadline arrived at last?" "Yes, Lord Sithrak." Elena kept her voice meek and broken. "We are ready. All of us. We will not resist." "Excellent. I am sending inspection teams to verify your compliance. They will board in 1 hour. If everything is satisfactory, we will begin processing immediately." 1 hour, Elena repeated. "Yes, Lord Sithrak. We will be waiting." The screen went dark. Elena stood motionless for a moment, then turned to her crew. "We have less than an hour before they board. Marcus, how long until we can fire?" 10 minutes for final power-up. Then maybe 30 seconds of sustained fire before everything burns out. That gives us 45 minutes of margin. Enough time for something to go wrong. "Commander," Park said urgently, "I am detecting movement from the alien fleet. One of their ships is breaking formation." Elena spun to look at the window. Sure enough, one of the Kethvari warships was moving toward them, its running lights blinking as it approached. But it was not moving like an attack run. It was moving slowly, deliberately. "That is an inspection shuttle," Elena said. Her stomach dropped. "They are coming early." "Commander, if they board before we fire..." "I know." Elena's mind raced through possibilities. If the Kethvari came aboard and saw what they were building, it was over. They would destroy the Prometheus immediately. There would be no weapon, no statement, no legacy, just death. She had one chance. One desperate, stupid chance. "Park, can we delay them? Claim a malfunction? Something that prevents docking?" They would not believe it. And if we refuse to let them dock, they will get suspicious. Elena closed her eyes. She thought about the colonists below, the children playing the wire game, the engineers who had worked themselves to exhaustion building the impossible. She thought about Maya, the little girl who was so proud to be a hero. "Then we let them board," she said slowly. "And we make sure they do not find anything." "How?" Elena opened her eyes. They were hard and cold. "By giving them something else to look at. Something that keeps their attention away from engineering. Commander, tell the colonists to gather in the main atrium. All of them. Make it look like a surrender ceremony. The Kethvari will expect us to be assembled and waiting. They will not look too closely at the rest of the ship if they think we are already beaten." Park nodded, understanding dawning on his face. A distraction. The oldest trick in the book. Let us hope it works. The shuttle continued its approach, growing larger in the window with every passing minute. Elena watched it come, her heart pounding in her chest. Behind her, her crew scrambled to prepare the deception. Everything was falling into place. The weapon was ready. The ship was aligned. The galaxy was watching. In 30 minutes, either they would fire the shot that changed everything, or they would die having accomplished nothing. Elena straightened her uniform and prepared to meet their enemies. Whatever happened next, she was going to face it standing tall. And if the Kethvari wanted to see a broken human begging for mercy, they were about to be very disappointed. The Kethvari inspection shuttle docked with the Prometheus with a sound like metal bones scraping together. Elena stood at the airlock, flanked by Lieutenant Park and 2 security officers who had nothing more dangerous than handheld tools hidden in their uniforms. They were not soldiers. They had never been soldiers. But they stood straight and tried to look like they were already beaten. The airlock hissed open, and the smell hit Elena first. It was a sharp, chemical odor, like burned copper mixed with something organic and wrong. Behind the smell came the Kethvari. There were 6 of them. They were taller than humans, with long limbs that bent at odd angles and skin that shifted color slightly as they moved. Their golden eyes swept over Elena and her crew with cold assessment, like farmers looking at livestock. The leader stepped forward. He wore a uniform covered in medals and insignia that meant nothing to Elena. His mouth was curved in what might have been a smile or might have been contempt. "I am Inspector Krath," he said. His voice was higher than Sithrak's, with a clicking undertone that made Elena's teeth hurt. "You are the commander of this vessel?" "Yes," Elena said. She kept her eyes down, her shoulders slumped. "I am Commander Vasquez. We are ready to comply with Lord Sithrak's orders." "We will see." Krath gestured to his team, and they spread out, pulling out scanning devices that hummed and beeped as they swept the corridor. "My orders are to verify that your crew is assembled, and that there are no weapons or escape attempts being prepared. Of course, our colonists are gathered in the main atrium. I can take you there." Krath studied her for a long moment. His golden eyes were unreadable. "You are very cooperative, Commander. More than I expected from a human. Your species has a reputation for being difficult." Elena forced a submissive smile onto her face. "We are just cargo haulers, Inspector. Farmers and teachers and engineers. We have no weapons, no military training. We know when we are beaten." Krath did not look convinced, but he nodded. "Lead the way." Elena walked through the corridors of her ship with aliens at her back. The emergency lights still cast everything in red, making shadows dance on the walls. Every few meters, they passed colonists who had been positioned to look busy but harmless. These people had been given a script. Look defeated, avoid eye contact, answer questions with simple responses. The main atrium was the largest open space on the Prometheus. It had been designed as a gathering place for the colonists, a space for celebrations and meetings and community events. Now it was filled with over 2,000 people, packed together in a silent crowd. Elena saw faces she recognized. There was Dr. Chen, standing near the back with a group of children clustered around his legs. There was Rivera, who had left engineering to play her part in the deception. There were families holding hands, couples holding each other, strangers who had become friends in the desperate hours since the attack. They were all looking at Elena. They were all waiting for her signal. "Very good," Krath said, surveying the crowd. "They are assembled, as promised. Now my team will verify the count and check for weapons." He turned to his subordinates. "Begin the inspection. Report any anomalies." The Kethvari spread through the crowd, scanning humans with their devices, pushing people aside when they moved too slowly. Elena watched them work, her heart pounding. Every second that passed was a second closer to firing the weapon. Every second that passed was also a second closer to disaster. One of the Kethvari inspectors moved toward the back of the atrium, where a door led to the lower decks. That door led to engineering, to the reactor, to everything. Elena saw Park notice the same thing. He gave her a tiny, almost invisible nod. "Inspector Krath," Elena said quickly, stepping forward. "May I ask a question?" Krath turned to look at her, annoyance flickering across his alien features. "What is it?" "Lord Sithrak mentioned that we would be processed. I have been explaining this to my people, but many of them do not understand what that means. Could you clarify?" It was a distraction, pure and simple. Elena needed Krath's attention away from his subordinate, away from that door. Krath's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. "You want to know what happens to you? Very well. Your species is classified as suitable for biological processing. This means your organic material has value. Some of you will be converted into nutrient paste for our food supplies. Others will be used for medical research. The young and healthy may be taken as labor resources." He tilted his head. "Does that answer your question?" Elena felt sick. She had known, in an abstract way, what the Kethvari intended, but hearing it spelled out so casually, so clinically, made it horrifyingly real. "Yes," she managed. "Thank you for clarifying." Behind Krath, the inspector who had been heading toward engineering stopped. He had found something. His scanning device was beeping rapidly, and his golden eyes were fixed on the readout with growing alarm. Elena's blood went cold. "Inspector Krath," the subordinate called out. "I am detecting unusual energy readings from the lower decks. The reactor output is far above normal parameters." Krath spun around. "What?" "The ship's main reactor. It is producing power levels that should be impossible for a vessel of this class, and there appears to be a large amount of that power being channeled somewhere in the lower sections." For a moment, nobody moved. The entire atrium seemed frozen in time. Elena could see the calculations happening behind Krath's golden eyes. the suspicion crystallizing into certainty. Then Krath looked at her. His face had changed. The condescension was gone, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "Commander Vasquez, what is happening in your lower decks?" Elena did not answer. She could not think of a lie fast enough. She could not think of anything at all. "I asked you a question, human." Krath stepped closer, his long fingers closing around Elena's arm. His grip was like iron. "What are you hiding?" Behind him, Dr. Chen made a decision. The old botanist had been watching from the back of the atrium, surrounded by children who did not understand what was happening. He had seen the Kethvari inspector discover their secret. He had seen the look on Elena's face when she realized everything was falling apart. Dr. Chen was 73 years old. He had lived a good life, and he was not going to let these monsters take that secret to their warships. He stepped forward, gently pushing the children behind him, and shouted at the top of his lungs. Now, it was not a word that meant anything by itself. There was no planned signal, no coordinated attack. But it did not need to mean anything specific. It just needed to break the tension, to create chaos, to give the humans something to do besides stand and wait. And that is exactly what it did. The colonists surged forward. They were not soldiers, but they were desperate. They threw themselves at the Kethvari with nothing but their bare hands and the tools they had hidden in their clothes. Welding torches and wire cutters and metal pipes appeared from nowhere. The atrium erupted into violence. Elena twisted free from Krath's grip as he stumbled backward in surprise. Park was already moving, tackling one of the inspectors to the ground. Nearby, Rivera swung a heavy wrench at another alien's head, connecting with a crack that echoed through the chaos. The Kethvari were better armed and better trained. They drew weapons that hummed with deadly energy and began firing into the crowd. Humans fell, screaming, their bodies convulsing as alien energy tore through them. But there were 2,000 humans and only 6 Kethvari. Numbers meant something, even against superior technology. Dr. Chen reached the inspector who had discovered the reactor readings. The alien turned, weapon raised. But Dr. Chen did not stop. He drove forward with all his weight, pushing the Kethvari backward through the door to engineering, tumbling them both down the corridor beyond. "Go!" Dr. Chen shouted. "Finish it. Do what you came to do." Then a burst of energy hit him in the chest, and he collapsed. In the atrium, the fighting continued. Elena grabbed a piece of broken equipment from the floor and used it to strike at Krath. She missed his head but caught his weapon hand, sending the gun spinning away. Krath snarled and lashed out with his claws, raking lines of fire across Elena's shoulder. She did not feel the pain. There was no room for pain anymore. "Park!" she screamed. "Get to engineering, tell Marcus to fire. Fire now!" Park was bleeding from a wound on his forehead, but he heard her. He broke away from the fight and ran for the door, leaping over Dr. Chen's fallen body and disappearing into the corridor beyond. Elena turned back to face Krath. The alien was reaching for a backup weapon hidden in his uniform. She threw herself at him before he could draw it, and they crashed to the floor together, rolling and struggling and clawing at each other. Around them, the battle raged. Colonists died by the dozens as Kethvari weapons found their marks. But more humans kept coming, piling onto the surviving aliens, dragging them down through sheer weight of numbers. Rivera killed one of the inspectors with her wrench, hitting him again and again until he stopped moving. A group of colonists overwhelmed another, beating him with their fists until he was still. A third inspector tried to retreat to the shuttle, but a wave of humans blocked his path and pulled him down. 17 colonists died in those terrible minutes. Men and women who had dreamed of building homes on a new world instead gave their lives in a corridor fight against monsters. Their blood stained the floor of the atrium. Their screams echoed through the ship, but they bought the time that was needed. In engineering, Marcus Cole received the message from a gasping, bleeding Lieutenant Park. "Fire," Park said, collapsing against the wall. "The commander says fire now." Marcus looked at his console. The weapon was not ready. The calibration was off. The alignment was still 2 degrees from optimal. The chances of success had just dropped from 50% to something much lower. "How bad is it up there?" Marcus asked. "Bad. They know. The Kethvari warships will know soon too if they do not already. We have minutes, maybe less." Marcus turned to his engineering team. They were all looking at him, waiting for the order. Tanaka, Obi, Rivera was still upstairs, fighting. But the others were here, ready. You heard the man, Marcus said. Power up the reactor conduit. Engage the focusing system. We fire in 60 seconds. Marcus, the calibration. Tanaka started. I know. We fire anyway. 40% odds are still odds. We take them. The engineers moved to their stations. Marcus watched the numbers climb on his console as power began flowing through the conduit they had built with their bare hands. The ship groaned around them, metal protesting against forces it was never designed to handle. In the reactor room, the unstable core pulsed with terrible energy. The containment field flickered and sparked, barely holding together. Heat poured off the conduit in waves, making the air shimmer. 30 seconds. Tanaka called out. Marcus opened a channel to the bridge. He did not know if anyone was there to hear it, but he spoke anyway. Attention all hands. This is Chief Engineer Cole. We are firing in 30 seconds. All personnel should brace for extreme conditions. And, thank you. All of you. It has been an honor. In the atrium, Elena heard the announcement through the ship's speakers, which had somehow survived the chaos. She was still grappling with Krath on the floor, both of them bloody and exhausted. What have you done? Krath hissed. What is happening? Elena smiled. It was a terrible smile, full of blood and victory. We are saying goodbye, Inspector, and we are taking your empire with us. Krath's golden eyes widened with understanding. And fear. The Prometheus began to shake. In engineering, Marcus watched the power levels climb beyond any safe measurement. The conduit was holding, barely. The focusing system was engaging. The gravitational compressors were cascading their effect through the beam. 10 seconds, Tanaka said. The heat in the room was unbearable now. Marcus could feel his skin starting to burn. He could smell smoke and melting plastic, but he did not move from his station. 5 seconds. For humanity, Marcus whispered. The weapon fired. For 3 seconds, the UES Prometheus stopped being a ship and became something else. Something ancient and terrible and powerful beyond measure. Every joule of energy from the unstable reactor poured through the conduit, through the focusing array, through the gravitational compressors, and out the modified emitter in a beam of pure destruction. The emitter melted almost instantly. Just as Obi had predicted, the conduit began to fail, sending arcs of energy through the hull. The reactor containment finally gave out, starting a chain reaction that would consume everything in seconds. But those 3 seconds were enough. The beam shot across space at the speed of light. It crossed the distance between the Prometheus and Keth Prime in minutes. Invisible and unstoppable, the Kethvari warships surrounding the dying freighter had no warning. One moment they were preparing to attack, and the next they were watching something unprecedented streak past them toward their homeworld. In the atrium, Elena felt the ship die around her. The floor buckled, the walls cracked. A terrible light filled the space, brighter than any sun. She looked up at Krath, who was still beneath her, his golden eyes wide with horror. Remember us, she said. Then the Prometheus came apart. The explosion consumed everything. The ship, the colonists, the children who had played the wire game, the engineers who had built the impossible, the commander who had lied to save them all. 2,400 souls ended in an instant of fire and light. But in that same instant, millions of kilometers away, their legacy arrived. The beam hit Keth Prime's orbital defense stations first. They vaporized without even registering what was happening. Then it punched through the planetary shields, which had been designed to stop missiles and energy weapons, not a focused beam of stellar-level power. It entered the atmosphere like a needle through cloth. The air around it superheated instantly, creating a shock wave that flattened everything for kilometers. Then it touched the surface. The capital city of the Kethvari Dominion ceased to exist in less than a second. Buildings that had stood for 10,000 years became ash. Monuments to Kethvari supremacy melted like wax. The ancestral palace of Lord Sithrak, where his ancestors had ruled for generations, became a crater of glowing glass. The beam carved a trench across the northern continent. Molten rock sprang into the sky. Mountains collapsed. Rivers boiled away. The very crust of the planet cracked and shifted. When it was over, 60 million Kethvari were dead. The heart of their empire had been burned out, and the galaxy had witnessed something it would never forget. A cargo ship, unarmed, carrying colonists and families and children, and they had wounded a god. on the 6 Kethvari warships still floating near the debris field that had been the Prometheus. Officers stared at their screens in disbelief. They had recorded everything: the impossible weapon, the devastating impact, the death of their homeworld's greatest city. They did not know what to do. Their training had not prepared them for this. Nothing had prepared them for this. On other ships throughout Kethvari space, the same recordings were being viewed. On worlds that the Dominion had conquered, subjugated species watched with growing hope. On distant planets where humans had never been seen, governments took notice of the small, weak species that had just proven itself anything but weak. And across all of known space, a new truth was being written. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was not a resource to be harvested. Humanity was something else entirely. Something that the galaxy had never seen before. A species that would rather die than kneel. That would turn their own deaths into weapons. That would burn worlds rather than surrender. In the cold darkness where the Prometheus had been, nothing remained but debris and radiation, and a few scattered molecules of metal and plastic and human flesh. But the fire they had started would burn forever. The news reached Earth 3 days after the Prometheus died. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo was in her office at United Earth Fleet Command when the transmission arrived. It came through every channel simultaneously, bypassing all security protocols, demanding attention. She watched the footage on her screen with a face that slowly turned from confusion to horror to something else entirely. She saw the Prometheus surrounded by alien warships. She saw Commander Vasquez begging for mercy, playing a role that must have burned her soul. She saw the colonists gathered in the atrium, waiting, and then she saw the end, the beam, the impossible, beautiful, terrible beam of light that had crossed space and burned a hole in an alien world. When the footage ended, Admiral Okonkwo sat in silence for a long time. Then she picked up her communicator and called an emergency session of the United Earth Council. 12 hours later, humanity knew what had happened to the Prometheus. The reaction was not what the Kethvari had expected. They had broadcast the footage to humiliate humanity, to show the galaxy that humans were weak and pathetic, that they begged and cried when faced with superior power. They wanted to make an example of the Prometheus and her crew. Instead, they made them legends. On Earth, billions of people watched Elena Vasquez surrender to the alien inspector. They saw the tears, the broken posture, the words of submission. And then they saw the truth behind the deception. The weapon, the beam. The moment when a cargo ship full of farmers and teachers and children struck back against an empire. People wept. People cheered. People gathered in the streets, holding pictures of the Prometheus crew, singing songs that would become anthems. The names of the dead were read aloud in every city, every town, every settlement in human space. Elena Vasquez, Marcus Cole, Lieutenant Park, Dr. William Chen, Rivera, Tanaka, Obi, and 2,381 others who had chosen death over surrender. Within a week, the story had spread to every corner of the galaxy. It traveled on Kethvari broadcast channels that the Dominion could not shut down. It traveled on independent trading routes and pirate frequencies and diplomatic pouches. It reached species that had never heard of humanity and species that had been conquered by the Kethvari for generations. Everyone saw the same thing: a small, weak species that the Dominion had marked as prey. A single ship, disabled and helpless, surrounded by warships, and then fire, burning across space, turning surrender into vengeance. The message was clear. Humanity would not be harvested. Humanity would not be enslaved. Humanity would burn everything down before it would accept that fate. On Keth Prime, Lord Sithrak stood in the ruins of what had been his capital city. The northern continent was still burning. Smoke rose into the sky in columns that could be seen from orbit. The death toll was still being counted, but it had already passed 60 million. His empire was in chaos. The Dominion had been built on the assumption of superiority. For 10,000 years, the Kethvari had conquered and harvested weaker species without consequence. They had grown complacent, arrogant, certain that no prey could ever threaten them. Now that certainty was gone, the subjects of the Dominion had seen what the humans did. They had seen that the mighty Kethvari could bleed. They had seen that a single ship, properly motivated, could wound a god. And they were beginning to ask themselves a dangerous question. If humans could do this, what could we do? Rebellions broke out within weeks. Species that had been conquered centuries ago suddenly remembered their old names and old flags. Slave populations that had been docile for generations began to fight back. The Dominion's armies were stretched thin, trying to suppress fires that kept spreading no matter how many they put out. And everywhere, the rebels invoked the name of the Prometheus. They called it the human way. They told stories about how the humans had built a weapon from nothing, how they had refused to surrender even when surrender was the only logical choice. They made heroes of Elena Vasquez and Marcus Cole, turning them into symbols of resistance. The HFY tried to suppress these stories. They banned the footage. They executed anyone caught repeating the names of the Prometheus crew. But it was like trying to stop water with their hands. The story was too good, too powerful, too inspiring. It spread anyway. Within a year, the Dominion was collapsing. Lord Sithrak was killed by his own officers, who blamed him for the disaster. His successor lasted 3 months before being overthrown in a military coup. The coup leaders fought among themselves while their empire burned around them. By the time 5 years had passed, the HFY Dominion had fragmented into a dozen warring states. The species they had enslaved were free. The worlds they had conquered were independent. The great empire that had terrorized a quarter of the galaxy was reduced to a footnote in history, and humanity had changed too. The United Earth Fleet was expanded tenfold. New ships were built, not cargo freighters but warships, designed to fight and win. The technology that Marcus Cole had improvised from mining equipment was studied and refined, turned into weapons that could threaten any enemy. More importantly, humanity's reputation had changed. Other species that had once ignored the small newcomers now watched them with respect and caution. Trade agreements were negotiated. Alliances were formed. Ambassadors who had once dismissed human diplomats now listened carefully to every word they said. The phrase that had traveled across the galaxy became a proverb, repeated in 100 languages: never corner a human. 100 years after the destruction of the Prometheus, a delegation of human officials traveled to the Velkar system. They brought with them a massive structure, assembled in orbit over the course of months. When it was complete, they positioned it at the exact coordinates where the Prometheus had died. The monument was simple but powerful. A tower of black stone and gleaming metal, tall enough to be seen from light years away. At its base, the names of every person who had died aboard the Prometheus were engraved in letters of gold. All 2,400 of them. At the top of the monument, a beam of light shone into the void. It was not a weapon, just a beacon, but it was aligned to point in the same direction that the Prometheus had fired, toward Keth Prime, which was now a shattered world, its civilization destroyed, its people scattered to the winds. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo III, granddaughter of the woman who had first received the footage, stood before the monument and delivered the dedication speech. She was old now, her hair white and her face lined, but her voice was strong. 100 years ago, she said, a ship called the Prometheus was attacked in this system. She was a cargo freighter, carrying colonists to a new world. She had no weapons, no military training, no way to fight back. The HFY Dominion disabled her and demanded her surrender. They expected her crew to kneel. They expected humanity to accept our place as their prey. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces watching her. There were thousands of people present, on ships and stations throughout the system. Millions more were watching through broadcasts across human space. They were wrong, she continued. Commander Elena Vasquez and her crew made a choice. They could die as cattle, or they could die as warriors. They chose to fight. They built a weapon from nothing but spare parts and determination. And when they fired it, they changed the galaxy forever. She turned to face the monument, her back straight, her chin high. We are here today to honor their memory, to remember what they sacrificed, and to remind ourselves, and everyone watching, what humanity is capable of when we have nothing left to lose. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the most advanced, but we are the species that will never, ever surrender. We will fight until our last breath. We will find a way when there is no way, and we will make anyone who threatens us regret it. She raised her hand in salute. To the crew of the Prometheus, to the colonists who dreamed of building homes on a new world, to the children who played the wire game, not knowing they were helping to build a weapon, to the engineers who turned the impossible into reality, to the commander who lied so convincingly that she bought her people time to save their honor. Her voice rose, filling the void. You asked us to surrender. We gave you our answer, and the galaxy will never forget it. The ceremony ended. The delegates departed. But the monument remained, a permanent marker in the darkness of space. Its light shone eternally toward the broken world that had once been the heart of an empire. Ships passing through the system began to stop at the monument. It became a tradition, first among human vessels and then among others. Traders and explorers and diplomats would pause for a moment of silence, reading the names, honoring the dead. Some left offerings, flowers, tokens, messages of thanks. The aliens who stopped there always seemed a little nervous. They would look at the monument, at the list of names, at the beam of light pointing toward Keth Prime, and they would remember the lesson that the Prometheus had taught. Humans were not to be trifled with. Years turned into decades. Decades turned into centuries. The story of the Prometheus became legend, then myth, then something even older. Parents told their children about the cargo ship that became a weapon. Teachers taught the history of the human way. Poets wrote verses about Elena Vasquez and Marcus Cole and the little girl named Maya who had collected wire for a weapon she did not understand. The details changed, as details always do. In some versions, the Prometheus survived long enough for a few crew members to escape. In others, Elena Vasquez lived long enough to see the beam hit Keth Prime, and her last words became the motto of humanity. In still others, the children aboard the ship were the ones who built the weapon, turning their game into something real. But the core of the story never changed. A ship was cornered. Its people were told to surrender. They refused. They built something impossible, fired a shot that crossed the stars, and changed the galaxy forever. That was the truth. That was the legacy. That was what the galaxy remembered when they thought about humanity. In the council chambers of 100 alien species, in the strategy rooms of fleets and empires, in the quiet conversations of beings who had watched civilizations rise and fall for millennia, the same phrase was repeated: never corner a human. They would rather become the fire than feel its heat. And so the Prometheus lived on, not in flesh and blood, but in something more enduring, in the fear of enemies, in the hope of allies, in the pride of humanity, in the stories told to children on 1,000 worlds about the little ship that shook the stars. They had been cattle, marked for harvest. They had been helpless, surrounded, defeated before the battle even began, and they had won anyway, not by surviving, not by escaping, but by making sure that their deaths meant something, by turning their last moments into a message that would echo through eternity. The galaxy had learned to fear many things over its long history: supernovae and black holes, and the cold death of entropy. But after the Prometheus, after the beam, after the fire, they learned to fear something new. They learned to fear humanity, and that fear would keep humanity safe for a very, very long time. On the monument in the Velkar system, the beam of light continued to shine. It would shine for centuries more, a constant reminder of what had happened here. A warning, a promise. At the base of the monument, carved below the names of the dead, was a single inscription. They asked us to surrender. We gave them our answer. Around that inscription, visitors had left their own marks over the years. Messages in 100 languages, from 100 species. Some were grateful, some were awed, some were simply acknowledgments of a debt that could never be repaid. But one message appeared more often than any other. It was written in simple letters, sometimes scratched into the stone by visitors who had no other way to express what they felt. Humanity, fuck yeah. It was crude. It was simple. It was exactly right. The Prometheus was gone. Her crew was dust and memory. But their fire burned on, bright and eternal, lighting the way for a species that would never, ever surrender. And somewhere in the infinite darkness of space, among the scattered atoms that had once been 2,400 human beings, something like satisfaction might have lingered. They had been asked to kneel. They had chosen to burn, and the galaxy would remember that choice forever.